What if you could read someone, truly read them, without a single word being spoken? What if behind every nervous laugh, every overconfident opinion, every quiet silence, there were patterns, fractures, confessions? Nietzsche believed there's no such thing as a neutral face. Every smile hides a calculation. Every boast hides a wound. Every silence hides a storm. Most people don't want to be understood. They want to be validated, to be admired, to be applauded. But the terrifying thing about being seen is that it makes hiding impossible. So we build identities, carefully, painfully, not to express who we are, but to protect who we were. And once you realize that, you stop believing what people say about themselves. You start watching for what leaks through the cracks. Because everyone leaks. You want to read someone instantly? Then stop looking at their performance. Start looking at their patterns. When someone walks into a room and immediately controls the energy, watch what happens when someone else does the same. Do they smile? Do they fade back? Or do they tighten? Insecurity isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's dominant. And what looks like confidence can be a last defense before collapse. Nietzsche saw this everywhere. In philosophers, in leaders, in lovers. He knew that the need to impress was rarely about strength. It was about early hunger. The kind of hunger that never really leaves. Admiration becomes a drug, and the more someone needs it, the more you should ask, what are they avoiding inside themselves? Because true strength has no need to perform. And then there's laughter. Nietzsche didn't trust words, but he trusted laughter. Because people don't rehearse it, they don't polish it, it escapes. So if you want to know what someone really thinks, watch what they laugh at. Mocking the weak, celebrating the downfall of others, finding joy in discomfort, that laughter is a crack. And through that crack, the hidden architecture of the soul becomes visible. The cruelty people can't say out loud, they often reveal in jokes. It's not just a sense of humor, it's a confession. You'll also notice something strange in people who constantly declare what they hate. I can't stand liars. I despise arrogance. I hate drama. Nietzsche would pause here and ask not what they said, but why they said it so loudly. Because moral outrage is rarely objective. It's autobiographical. What someone passionately condemns in others often mirrors what they fear, regret, or suppress in themselves. The louder the moral stance, the deeper the personal scar. So when someone talks with heat, with obsession, with righteous intensity, don't just listen. Decode. What story are they trying not to tell? And then, there's how someone treats the powerless. Not when the cameras are on, not when there's a reward, but in the invisible moments. How do they speak to the waiter, the janitor, the stranger, the animal that can't defend itself? That's not a test of manners, that's a test of soul. Nietzsche believed that a person's true character is revealed in how they treat those who hold no power over them. Because when there's nothing to gain, there's nothing to fake. You'll see people become who they really are only when no one is watching, or when they think no one matters. And now we come to the story we all tell, our own. Autobiography is not memory, it's strategy. We all edit. We all highlight the noble moments. We all skip the chapters we haven't forgiven yet. When someone describes who they are, pay attention not to what they include, but to what they avoid. Where do they skip over details? Where do they speak too vaguely, too rehearsed, too clean? Those silences are red flags, because the truth is never tidy, and if their story is, it's not the real one. Even the good roles people choose, the victim, the hero, the selfless one, are still roles. Nietzsche warned, we are all actors until we dare to live without an audience. Another way to read someone? Watch how they handle disagreement. If their need to be right is absolute, if being challenged feels like betrayal, you're not looking at logic, you're looking at fear. The most dangerous minds are not the ones with strong opinions. They're the ones who can't survive being wrong. Because to them, being wrong means losing control, losing identity, losing worth. And so they double down, even when the truth is burning in front of them. Certainty for many is a shield, not a sign of confidence, but a sign of internal panic. If you want to measure someone's strength, don't watch them win. Watch them lose an argument. And then, pay attention to envy. Because envy is raw truth. It's not polite. It doesn't wear a mask. It doesn't negotiate. When someone envies something, they're not just admiring it. They're saying, that should have been mine. Watch where people direct their jealousy, what they mock, what they roll their eyes at, what they downplay. Envy is never about the other person. It's about what we believe we're lacking, or what we were denied. And in that moment, you can see the soul in its most honest form, aching. Then, look at love. Or rather, look at how people speak about it. Those who shout most about love, compassion, peace, are not always overflowing with it. Sometimes it's the opposite. Nietzsche believed that excess virtue signaling often masks inner famine. The louder someone preaches about love, the more likely they are trying to convince themselves they still have some. Because what we overemphasize is often what we're afraid is missing. This doesn't make them liars. It makes them lost. And finally, the group. Most people don't follow the herd because they're dumb. They follow because they're exhausted. Thinking for yourself is hard. It isolates you. It costs relationships. It makes you question everything. So people conform, not because they believe, but because they're tired. And when someone echoes the crowd, don't dismiss them. Understand what it cost them to survive. Because conformity isn't just social, it's emotional, and often traumatic. And here's the uncomfortable part. Everything we just discussed, you've done. You've flinched under truth. You've decorated your past. You've spoken from envy, not clarity. You've repeated what felt safe, not what was real. Nietzsche didn't expose these patterns to judge. He exposed them to set fire to illusion. Because once you read yourself, you become fluent in everyone else. You begin to see behind the words, behind the postures, behind the "I'm fine." You see the scars under the smiles, the hunger under the noise, the child behind the mask, and suddenly, you're not just hearing people, you're seeing them. Not who they claim to be, but who they are, when no one is watching. What if you could read anyone, instantly? Not by their words, not by what they want you to see, but by the cracks, the flickers behind their smiles, the instincts that slip through the surface when no one is watching. Nietzsche never cared much for what people claimed to be. He studied what they couldn't hide, their envy, their laughter, their silence, their need to be right. He believed that the soul doesn't show itself in grand declarations, but in subtle psychological tremors. So if you truly want to read people, you have to stop listening to what they say and start listening to what they reveal. Because most people don't want to be seen, they want to be admired. They spend their lives constructing versions of themselves, versions designed to win approval, praise, safety, not truth. The fear isn't of being judged. The fear is of being understood. Admiration is armor, and most people would rather be worshipped falsely than seen truly. You'll notice this in how someone lights up when they're being praised, but tightens when someone looks too closely. Most don't want connection, they want applause. But Nietzsche teaches something uncomfortable. The closer you get to someone's truth, the more likely they are to flinch. If you really want to know a person, don't ask them what they believe. Just watch what makes them laugh. Laughter is raw, it's unfiltered, and it tells you everything. Someone who laughs at cruelty doesn't just lack empathy. They enjoy watching others fall. Someone who laughs at discomfort is probably carrying shame. What people find funny is often what they're secretly at war with. And what they hate, that's where the soul really opens up. When someone says, "I hate liars," that's not a neutral statement. That's a wound. That's pain speaking. Nietzsche believed that most moral outrage is a disguised confession. People preach loudest against what they've suffered or committed against themselves. So when someone holds a belief with deep passion, don't just nod. Ask, where did that fire come from? Because no one shouts about something that hasn't marked them. Now, if you really want to see someone's soul, watch how they treat those who can do nothing for them. The powerless, the quiet, the invisible. Watch how they treat waiters, cleaners, animals, children, people they'll never see again. That's where their mask drops. That's where their true nature breathes. People think cruelty is a moment of weakness, but Nietzsche said no. It's a moment of honesty. That's the real them, when there's nothing to gain. And when someone talks about themselves, don't believe the character they've written. We're all authors of our own mythology. We choose which wounds to highlight, which mistakes to frame as lessons, which traits to exaggerate. Autobiography is theater. So listen closely to what they leave out. That's where the truth sits. That's where the real story begins. Have you noticed how the people most obsessed with being right are often the most afraid? It's not strength, it's terror. Certainty is a shield, a way to feel in control. Nietzsche warned us real strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need to win every argument. It doesn't see every disagreement as an attack. But fragile egos do. People who cling to certainty aren't confident. They're drowning. And their loudest opinions, they're life rafts. Now watch closely, because one of the most honest emotions people show is envy. When someone envies wealth, beauty, status, they're not just admiring it. They're mourning what they think should have been theirs. Envy is confession, a pure, unfiltered reveal of what someone secretly believes they deserve. So when someone mocks success or quietly celebrates failure, what they're really saying is, that should have been me. Envy doesn't lie, it burns. And strangely, people who speak endlessly about love, compassion, and kindness often do so not because they're overflowing with it, but because they're starving for it. Virtue, when it's real, doesn't need a megaphone. But when someone repeats it like a chant, over and over again, Nietzsche asks us to look deeper. Are they filled with love? Or are they desperate to believe they still can feel it? What people overemphasize is usually what they're missing the most. You've probably seen it. Someone always preaching about peace but internally boiling. Someone always talking about honesty, but lying to themselves. The louder the performance, the deeper the absence. And then there's the crowd. Nietzsche never blamed people for following the herd. He didn't see them as stupid. He saw them as tired. Thinking is painful. Holding your own views in a world that punishes difference takes strength. And most people, they've been punished enough. So they conform. Not because they're weak, but because they're exhausted. When someone echoes the group, they're not showing ignorance. They're showing scars. It's not stupidity, it's self-preservation. And maybe the most uncomfortable truth is this. You do it too. We all do. You've hidden your flaws. You've exaggerated your strengths. You've avoided thinking too hard when it hurt too much. Reading people isn't about superiority, it's about awareness. Nietzsche didn't write these insights to judge others. He wrote them to illuminate the war inside you. Because to understand another, you must first understand the parts of yourself you've buried. The human soul doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you learn to hear your own whispers, the ones beneath your ego, beneath your need to be liked, beneath your fear, then and only then, you'll begin to hear those whispers in others. That's how you read someone, not with judgment, but with precision, not with ego, but with clarity. And the moment you stop believing what people say about themselves and start watching how they move, how they flinch, how they breathe, that's the moment you stop being blind and start seeing what Nietzsche saw. Sometimes silence is louder than any opinion. Nietzsche knew when someone avoids a topic, dodges a question, changes the subject, they're not being polite. They're protecting something. They're hiding a fracture in the mind. And if you want to read someone, watch what they don't talk about, what they tiptoe around. That's where the truth is, behind the curtain of avoidance. Some truths are too sharp to say out loud, but they leak through our silences. And then there's this. People don't always act from reason. They act from wounds. You'll see this in people who sabotage what they say they want. They push away love. They avoid peace. They chase chaos. Not because they enjoy it, but because it's familiar. Nietzsche understood this deeply. People aren't logical. They're patterned. They repeat what they've survived, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. So when someone says they want happiness, but walks straight into pain, don't assume they're lying. Assume they're haunted. Want to know someone? Watch what they repeat. That's where the ghosts live. And the ones who fear being alone, pay close attention to them. Because the fear of solitude doesn't come from boredom. It comes from what rises in the silence. Nietzsche believed that many people surround themselves with noise, company, distraction, not because they love connection, but because they fear their own thoughts. To be alone is to be naked with your own mind. And for many, that's unbearable, so they run from quiet, from stillness, from the terrifying possibility of meeting themselves. If you see someone who always needs a crowd, you're not looking at confidence, you're looking at escape. But there's something even more subtle, something Nietzsche saw in the kindest, most generous people. He asked, why do some people give so much? Why do they serve, uplift, help, even when it destroys them? It's not always love. Sometimes it's guilt, or unworthiness, or the desperate need to earn approval. Some people were taught, early, that love must be earned, that value must be proven, and now they can't stop giving, even when it drains them. So when someone gives endlessly, look beyond the kindness. Ask what it's costing them, because not all generosity is healthy. Some of it is begging in disguise. And then there's anger, not rage, not yelling, but the quiet kind, the resentment that simmers under the surface. Nietzsche saw that suppressed anger turns into cynicism, the person who mocks everything, who jokes about people's dreams, who rolls their eyes at hope. They're not cruel, they're hurting. They've swallowed too many betrayals, and now everything tastes like bitterness. That cynicism, that's a scar, and every scar has a story. Sometimes to read someone is to look at their sarcasm and ask, what did they once believe in? That broke. Now, let's go even deeper, into what Nietzsche considered the final test of character. When everything collapses, when the career ends, the relationship fails, the spotlight fades, who do you become? Because many people are kind when they're admired. They're warm when things are going well. They're generous when praised. But when their ego is bruised, they turn. And that's when the real self appears. Nietzsche believed that crisis strips away illusion. And if you want to read someone clearly, watch how they behave when no one is applauding anymore. Do they blame, attack, collapse? Or do they grow quieter and wiser? You don't truly know a person until you've seen them disappointed. Some people grow after loss, others rot. And that, more than any philosophy, reveals the soul. But let's not forget the masks of competence. Some people walk like they know exactly who they are, but look closely. Confidence can be a shell, certainty can be a prison. Nietzsche warned, when someone always knows, always leads, always commands, it may not be strength, it may be the refusal to feel small again. Often, the strongest seeming people are still chasing the approval they never got at 7 years old. Don't be fooled by surface power. Read the tension underneath it. Even ambition isn't always ambition. Sometimes it's escape. Sometimes it's revenge. Many people don't want success. They want to prove something. To a father who never listened, to a teacher who laughed, to a world that never gave them a chance. When you look into someone's drive, ask, what is it made of? Desire or trauma? Even intelligence can be armor. There are people who collect knowledge not to understand, but to control, to dominate, to stay one step ahead of the pain. Nietzsche believed this. Wisdom is not the same as knowledge. Wisdom requires surrender, but knowledge without heart becomes cold, sharp, dangerous. Reading someone means seeing why they became what they are. And most of the time, it wasn't a choice. It was survival. Look at who they had to become in order to be safe, loved, useful, wanted. And finally, there is one moment that reveals more than any other. When someone is wrong and knows it, how do they respond? Do they soften, reflect, apologize, or do they double down? Attack, deflect? Nietzsche would say, that's when you see the architecture of their ego. Because only a secure soul can hold the weight of being wrong without shattering. So pay attention to how someone holds disagreement, to how they handle correction, to whether they want to grow or just win. You'll know them by how they treat the truth when it stops flattering them. And now, you've seen the map, the envy, the silence, the patterns, the sarcasm, the applause, the collapse, the need to please, the fear of stillness. the refusal to be wrong. They're all signals. They all whisper one thing: I am human, I am afraid, I am trying to matter, and so are you. Because this isn't just about reading them, this is about reading you. Because everything you just heard, you've done too. You've performed, you've protected, you've repeated, you've flinched when truth got too close. Nietzsche didn't leave us this mirror to mock. He left it to awaken. So read, look hard, see beyond the surface, and most of all, do not run from what you find. Because the moment you stop running, the world opens. And suddenly the people around you are no longer strangers. They're reflections. Some cracked, some clean, some screaming, some whispering, but all carrying truths you now know how to see. You've learned to read them. Now have the courage to read yourself.